Welcome to the Delta Podcast. I'm your host, Coach Cole. This is the show where we dive into the relationship between leadership and change, what it means for individuals, teams, and organizations looking to thrive. Today's a great day to be coachable, so let's jump in. Amy Shepley, hello, my friend. Welcome into the pod.
Hello, glad to be here in the pod.
It is great to be with you. I'm excited to have this conversation. First, I want to give folks a chance to know a little bit more about you. So I'd like to read some information about you, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay. So my guest today, Amy Shepley, has over 20 years of experience working with corporate teams and organizational behavior. She's the proud granddaughter of the founder and esteemed industrial organizational psychologist, Dr. Roger W. Birkman. Also the daughter of Sharon Birkman. Throughout her 19-year tenure at Birkman, Amy has worked with a global network of consultants and corporate clients to enhance the usability of the Birkman method and solve modern organizational challenges. In 2019, Amy founded her consulting company, Percept, utilizing Birkman as an independent consultant, working with Fortune 500 companies to drive achievements in team effectiveness. You also worked on change management, leadership development, and culture, which is a big one. In that time, Amy became the most in-demand workshop facilitator for highly successful companies due to her deep understanding of the product and wide-ranging experience applying solutions within a broad set of industries. In 2022, Amy returned to Birkman International as president. Amy cultivated her professional expertise on top of undergraduate psychology studies and an MBA from Tulane University. It was an amazing school. Her ongoing passion for innovation in organizational success at Birkman is one of her key drivers as a leader. So, Amy, it's a pleasure to be here with you. That was just the top line of who you are and what you do. What did I miss? What would you like to folks to know that I didn't hit?
That's a good question. First, it's interesting to sit there when your bio is. What would I want people to know? I think, I spend really all of my time almost in this like social lab watching people. And, when you have an assessment like the Birkman and you have like certain language of how you can start understanding people and personality. And so I just really live in this like observer world. It's just like the whole world sort of feels like a laboratory. And every interaction is like part of the experiment, right? And that's what consumes probably like 80% of my waking hours is that.
I think I'm following you, but can you say a little bit more about that? Like what you mean by the thing that you're observing?
Yeah, I think, what I spend most of my time talking about, and I think my mission in a way is helping people understand how unique the experience you're having is, and it's actually completely unique. So no one's ever lived in the body that you have, or had the perception that you've had, or been in the world in this moment. Like it's so completely unique.
Yeah.
And yet we interact like we're having a common experience. And there's this almost assumption in everything we do, like, well, of course it's that way, or that's obvious, right? And we're so detached in a way from this truth of how no one can ever really understand you, right? And even to take it a step further, you'll never really even understand yourself, because the one thing you will never get to do is sit in the room with yourself. You will only experience the world through like your point of view. And so it moves you into a place of complete curiosity all the time, which I think is the best place to be, right? When you acknowledge that it's not obvious to anybody, what you're seeing is not the same as anybody else. No one's having the same experience as you. They never have, and they never will. It gives you a unique point of view, and it puts you in a unique position of how to experience the world. And that's probably where I spend 80% of my time, is watching people and how they're interacting with the world and making sense of the world. and being fascinated at how different it is from how I'm making sense of the world.
I want to play this back if I may. I mean, you're an expert on personality and perception and how those two things interact. And if I'm hearing you, there's no version of getting to total clarity there.
Right.
We maybe get an approximation of it or get close.
Yeah.
But let's, an example here, we bring this into the conversation you and I are having. We're here together in this pod. You're having your experience. I'm having my experience. Maybe connected in this shared moment, but we're having different experiences.
Yep.
But am I hearing you correctly that like close is the best that we can do?
Yes. And maybe not even close, maybe barely grasping is the best that we can do, right? I think the more you think it's similar, the more you put yourself in a position where it's dangerous, because if you think it's similar, you make assumptions, and assumptions are dangerous, right? Assumptions are going to lead to conflict. And so, I think the best thing that we can do is to say, it's not obvious. Nobody knows how I feel. I don't know how anyone else feels. What makes sense to them? What, all of those things that just feel so universally true to us. Like and so that's the risk, is that we just make assumptions that of course it's that way for everybody else. Of course, you feel that way. And even if at an intellectual level we know that, because I think I experienced this a lot myself, and even with other Birkman consultants, sometimes when you intellectually know it, it's more dangerous because it's harder to operationalize it in real life, because you're like, but I know that already. I know we're not seeing the world the same way, but I can know that in an intellectual level. And that doesn't mean that when I'm having a conversation and we're disagreeing about something, that I'm actively remembering he's having a different experience. He has different data points. He's making sense of it in a different way. It's so easy to slip out of that mindset.
That's a great call out. I don't want to slip into the actual conversation. Well, let me say something before we kind of hop into the three questions here. So on the Delta, we talk about leadership and change, as you know, what it means for individuals, teams, and organizations looking to optimize. I'm thrilled to hear what you're bringing into the conversation. I don't know what you want to talk about. There are three questions. What do you want to talk about today? Why should we talk about this now? And what does success in this conversation look like? So I'm going to kick it back to you. With the time that we got, what would you like to talk about?
So what I would like to talk about today is conflict.
Okay.
And so I am a believer that over 99% of the conflict that we experience in the world is from different points of view and different perceptions, right? And because we don't hold that as a constant understanding that we have different perceptions, that's where the conflict breeds from, because we're not seeing the world the same way. So if we all had the exact same perception, we would be very boring and we would be like robots, so it wouldn't be very interesting. But the conflict would go away because we're all operating from the same roadmap, right? So the amount of conflict that would go away, it would just decrease significantly. And the reason why I think it's interesting now is, we hear this constantly about the world's never been more decisive. Like, we have news that's sort of feeding us these echo chambers of information. And I don't know if it's true, because I only have my 44 years of experience to say, but I always hear it's more divisive than ever, right?
Yeah.
I hear that a lot. And so
I do too. That's yes.
So that's conflict. Like, we're acknowledging that there's conflict. And if you've ever watched, these shows where they will take people that have very different political opinions and they put them in a room together. Mm-hmm. And once they have to sit together and actually see that person as a human and start to be compassionate, all of a sudden the differences of opinions go away. It doesn't matter anymore, right? And why? It's because you're tapping into that person's point of view and their experience, and that diffuses the conflict.
Yes.
And so at a kind of a macro level right now, we're living in this time where, and that's the exact point. That's the problem is, instead of the world and media and whatever you want to call it, exposing us to the differences in opinion, it's doubling down on there being a right opinion and the one point of view, which is automatically going to invite conflict. And it's not a political statement either way, right? I think we're all starting to be guilty of it, and we all consume the news in a way that I think perpetuates the problem. but it's almost reinforcing the opposite of what we should be focusing on, which is you have a unique experience, a unique point of view, and what can I learn from that, and how can that be interesting to me? Like, what do I take away from that, instead of it just being, if it's different, it's wrong.
Yes. I want to play back something that felt important. I think I heard it correctly. You were talking about the conflict doesn't stem from the thing that happened. The thing happens. That's not where the inherent conflict is. It's in how people respond to that. It's our
Yes.
perception of it. And you have the conflict isn't the thing that you and I both experience. It is how we process it.
Yes.
How we reflect on
Perfectly
it.
said.
Okay.
And that's
So can you say more about that? Because you're reframing in real time what conflict means for me.
Yeah. Well, the way you said that is perfect, is that we think it's about the thing, but it's not about the thing. It's about the story we tell about the thing.
Yes.
And the story is it's not true or false. It's your truth and your experience that makes perfect sense, right? When you're a consultant and you go in and you start working with like a dysfunctional leader or a dysfunctional team, it's always so interesting to me that when you really get to the root of the problem, 99% of the time, the person had good intentions, and they were a lot of times going out of their way to do the right thing, but the right thing wasn't the right thing for the person that they were working with, or for the
other
team.
person in the relationship.
Yes, exactly. Okay. And so because they're using their roadmap of how to manage that and what's the right way to manage it, they go forward with very good intentions, and it blows up and it's a disaster. And then they're so discouraged because it's like, I went out of my way to try to accommodate you and make you feel whatever, fill in the blank. And not only are you not thanking me, you're having this reaction that feels maybe borderline hostile.
Yeah.
And so now I'm offended. And now you're offended and I'm offended.
Yeah.
And so I love the way you say that. If we could realize the real conflict isn't about whatever the thing is, it's about the story that we make up and how we make sense of it, which are both true.
Yes. The real challenge is the story we make up about it.
Yes.
Okay. I think this is a great topic. I can imagine this resonating with many folks. Second question, why, of all the things that you and I could jam about today, why should we talk about this?
So we went through an exercise 2 weeks ago to really kind of talk about, Birkman and what are we doing? Like, what's the mission that we're fulfilling? And we kind of came up with this idea that Birkman is a people problem fixer, right? Like, you can take any people issue in an organization and I can use the Birkman to help you fix that problem. Like, that's a promise I stand by. That's something I know is true. And the reason it's a people problem fixer is because it helps you see how the person is perceiving the world and how they are making sense of the world. And once you see that roadmap, it makes sense why they're doing what they're doing. All of a sudden, it's like, oh, no wonder. No wonder you think that's the right thing to do. Or no wonder that hurts your feelings. Yes. Or no wonder that felt. It's like it all clicks. And without that information, you're in the dark. And most of the time we get to know employees and leaders and managers through trial and error, which is a strategy. And it's a lot of times the only strategy that we have. But it's a strategy that takes a lot of time, and it's a strategy that sets you up for a lot of potential conflict while you're learning.
Great. Okay, so if that's why we're talking about it now, what should we aim for in this conversation? What would success look like on your side of the screen?
Success for me would be to whoever listens to your podcast to fulfill what I think my purpose is of promoting this message that you are having a unique experience and everyone else is having a unique experience. And when you move out of assumptions into curiosity, you will transform every relationship in your life. You will transform your relationship with your spouse, and you will transform the relationship with the attendant that you're buying gas from at the gas station. It, to me, is like the unlock of how you interact with people differently and you get different results. And people become a rewarding experience and not a challenging or a frustrating experience. Because if you ask most business owners, right, what is your biggest problem? What is the biggest issue that you face? What are they going to say? People.
Is that a question? Yes.
People.
Yes.
It's always people. Like, if I could run my business without people, that would be the dream. Right?
It's the most expensive problem.
And they are difficult and complex and expensive, right? So it's everyone's issue. And why is it an issue? It's always going to come down to conflict, either conflict between people, teams, leaders, managers, or even conflict with yourself, right? Like I'm going against what I should be doing. Like I want to be doing this, but I'm not doing that. I'm doing this, right? That's another form of conflict.
Okay, so let me ask you a question here. I have the fortune of supporting many folks in frontier tech, so AI, crypto, Web3, those spaces, where there is a sprint towards product market fit.
Mm-hmm.
You've probably seen this in your work as a consultant and as a coach. And so what I get to see is like there's a real urgency around we need to identify that need and solve for that need. And then we can start worrying about things at scale once people are really demanding this thing. I hear you introducing a different perspective, though. Like, yeah, that's important. If you want to be a great organization, a great team, you ought to spend time focusing on getting better at conflict.
Yeah.
Am I hearing you correctly? Okay.
Yeah,
so
100%. And what will happen is, a company is in its early phases, and it's interesting that even though any business owner will tell you their biggest issue is people, it's not usually the first problem they try to fix. They usually are trying to fix, the financials or the products that they're putting out, or they focus on these other parts of it. When what's going to probably be more predictive of their success is, do they have the right people, and are they the right people there thinking the right way? Right? Are we tapping into these different people's perspectives and point of views that the company could actually learn from? And usually that doesn't happen until the company's sort of getting more established. And by that point, there's usually a lot of conflict that has been created that is costly to fix and will slow the company down.
Okay, I think I know how you might respond to this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What if you're working with a leader who says, yeah, Amy, we've got more pressing issues right now. I'll worry about the conflict next quarter.
Yeah, and that is, I think, most of the time what they're going to say. I don't think that's not hard to imagine. It's that the reason of why your company is successful or not will be the people, whether we like it or not. It's the truth. And so focusing on that earlier on, I think will either accelerate your success, or if you don't, I think it will accelerate you not being successful. It will accelerate you, failing. I truly believe that.
Yeah, moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
It's just going to help you get there faster.
Yes. And have better ideas, right? You have people that are sharing their ideas. You're more receptive to hearing the idea because you now have, your mindset is they're having a unique experience. So their idea is a completely unique idea that I should entertain, right? It's all moving us out of that. I don't know the answer. I can't know the answer. And so I might have the answer, but the people sitting at this table may have a better answer. But if I'm not willing to challenge that, maybe they know something that I don't. If I'm not willing to be open to that, I'm not going to listen to the idea. Or I'm not going to listen to them when they say, I think that's a bad idea, or I think there's unintended consequences to what you're thinking about. And I'm willing to at least stop for a moment and entertain what those unintended consequences might be. And then say, yeah, I think that's a risk, or I don't, right? But and that's why you get into the conversation around psychological safety, and why that is quickly becoming just a word that any company will know, because psychological safety is the way you protect the company from conflict due to a lack of groupthink.
If I've never heard that term before, or I'm new to that term, what's an easy way to think about it?
So the term was coined by Dr. Amy Edmondson. She's phenomenal. And my favorite definition that she gives of psychological safety is silence when voice was necessary. And that
Can you
means,
say that again?
yes, silence when voice was necessary.
Okay.
So what does that mean? Silence when voice was necessary. It means we were at a meeting and I had an idea and I wasn't sure if it was a good idea. And so I didn't say it because I thought they would think I'm stupid. So I keep my mouth shut. And it was an amazing idea. But the company will not get to benefit from it because I didn't.
Because I sit on it.
Yes. Or I'm in a meeting and they're discussing something and I'm thinking, that is a disaster. And I don't say anything because I don't want to look like I'm a naysayer and I don't want to be negative. So I keep my mouth closed. I'm silent when I should have used my voice. Or, as we've seen kind of the typical kind of case studies of psychological safety is I saw something that I know shouldn't be happening and I'm not going to tell anybody because then I'm the whistleblower and I'll be punished. And this is where we have seen, VW and Boeing and companies that we could have never imagined having these types of things happen. And they've, these amazing brands with amazing reputations. And there's case studies about like the Boeing, lots of people knew it was a problem. They knew they were overworking people. They knew they were cutting corners. So many people knew and they didn't say anything. Why? Because the risk of speaking up outweighed the risk of staying quiet. Silence when voice was necessary. And so psychological safety not only promotes innovation and ideas, it also helps insulate companies from risk because you're empowering people to say, just say something. You're not going to get punished. And we want to know. And that's hard as a leader to create that environment, right? It's easy to say you want that, but to really operate a company from a place where you are encouraging, tell me if you think I'm wrong. Tell me if you think something's going to go wrong. Tell me your great ideas. It's hard in real time to do that.
I have a question that's coming to mind, but I want to check in. This is a wonderful topic for us to talk about. Is there a specific place that you would like to begin the conversation in before I take us off?
I'll just follow your lead.
Can you connect what you just said back to conflict? Because I'm imagining, I guess, here's the question kind of behind that. If I'm working in an organization and let's imagine you and I are on a team and the last time that you made a comment, I said, that's ridiculous. And in that experience, you remembered. And so the next time you have an idea and you feel like saying it, you choose not to say it because you don't feel like there's psychological safety there. How does conflict play into what we're talking about? Because I can imagine if this thing is going to get better, there is going to be conflict. If you're going to lean in and say something, you're putting yourself at risk to be ridiculed again. Or if I'm going to see something differently, that may be because of some conflict that we go through. So how does what we're talking about in terms of psychological safety tie back into maybe a better version or a more productive version of conflict?
So if we're in a meeting and I'm like, I have a crazy idea. I think fill in the blank. And you're like, that's a crazy idea. And like moving on, right? So I kind of put myself out there. You, from your own point of view, it makes sense that it's a crazy idea. So you're like, no, that's crazy. We move forward. Now that creates conflict, right? Because I'm frustrated at you because you've now shut down something that I was risking my voice to say something. And instead of you going, well, hold on, okay, that's interesting. I hadn't, it's just surprising. And like, let's sit and kind of think through that for a minute. That moment of going, maybe I'm not seeing something, and being curious allows the idea to get vetted, which means I feel seen and I don't feel like you've just disregarded my opinion. And maybe we say, actually, that's a good idea. Or we go, you know what, I don't think it's a good idea, and we move on. But instead of it turning into conflict, you shut me down and you thinking she's got crazy ideas that don't make sense. That's two forms of conflict now that were avoided. So we've traded in the creation of conflicts on both people's sides for a moment of curiosity that could either yield a better idea, or if nothing else, we explored it and discarded it. We still learned something, right? We learned it wouldn't work. So there's still value, because some people might go, well, that sounds like a waste of time. But it's not, because we are living in an unprecedented time when no one can know what the right answer is. And that statement should invoke fear, but also a place of curiosity, because no one can know. So it's like
Yeah.
that takes some pressure off,
Yes.
right? Like there's a beautiful message to that. If it is impossible to know, nobody can know right now. There's too many dependencies. There's too many interactions. That there's too many just things outside that we can't equate for. And so all we can do in that moment is have a conversation and weigh it, and then say, do we try it? Or, you know what, we discussed it and we're not going to do that, which there's still learning that happened there. That's still valuable to you as an employee, a leader, a team, and an organization, right? Just because something's not a success doesn't mean that the conversation and the learning isn't valuable. And so to me, that's the difference, right? It's that's what's so interesting, I think, about what we do, is that it's not just that if you don't do something, it creates conflict, or if you do, it creates better ideas. It's how quickly those little micro interactions can turn everything in a negative way, or really propel everything in a positive, innovative way. And in these things that completely impact the directionality of the company come down to those little micro conversations where someone says, I have an idea, or I have a thought, and someone else being willing to say, I'm going to hold my opinion and what I know to be true. I'm going to hold that for a moment and be curious about what your position is.
In
and
the interest of curiosity.
That I might not know, that you may have information that's helpful to me.
Yeah. That's a hard place, I would imagine, for leaders, especially smart leaders, who've had a career built on being right, or making an idea better, or winning.
Yes.
It's a hard thing to surrender in that moment and say, you know what, I think Amy's idea is bananas, but I'm going to hear her out.
100%. And, you know, I've been at Birkman over 20 years. And one of the traps I fall into a lot is when someone has an idea, I'm like, we've tried that. But we might have tried that 10 years ago, but today is a different time, right? So
different organization.
It's a different organization. So it is true. We tried that and it didn't work. I am right. And they are right that it wasn't tried today. It's not the same. So the fact that you tried it 10 years ago actually has little relevance to whether or not it's going to work today. So it's holding that ability to be open about things. And I think you're exactly right. The smarter you are and the more experience you have at that company or at that job, the harder it is, because you've got so much history with it.
Yes. Pretty simple and straightforward. Hard to do, though.
I think everything I do, because everything I do pretty much deals with people, that is a true statement. When I'm talking to these brilliant executives of these massive companies, I feel like what I'm saying sounds like first grade information, and yet I know it's why they're failing. It's like, I get it. It's like the paradox of, you think what I'm saying is so obvious and ridiculous that I'm wasting your time. And I am completely confident that this is why you're not successful right now. And it's the difference between intellectually understanding something and operationalizing that in how you interact with people day to day. It is the hardest thing.
I love that call out. That's a great point. Let's talk about the assessment, if you're up for it. I think it's the best kept secret in the world of assessments. And I know it's, at least from my perspective, more and more people are getting interested in this. It's not a new assessment. It's been around for 7 years?
Yep.
And I've been using it for years with clients. I used it personally in my own life. Maybe I'll get to that, and how that played out with me and my partner. But it's a remarkable tool.
Yeah.
So can you say, and I forgot to mention at the jump, I think one thing that you and I share in common, I think we're both blue.
Blue usual.
Yes.
Yeah, reflective, good one-on-one, a little more sensitive.
But I need to flex towards my friends in the red when I'm trying to ship something or get it out the door.
Yes. You got to lean on the people that help us get it done.
That's right. Right. Okay, so if folks listening don't know anything about the Birkman method, give us the story.
Yep. So as you said, it is, in my opinion, the most sophisticated non-clinical assessment that you can buy, right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of free assessments out there. Those are not psychometrically validated for the most part, which maybe you care about if you're more of a science person or a Birkman nerd like I am. A lot of people don't, but that's why it's important for companies that you're using something that's based in science, right? There's a lot of free assessments that are fun, and we can be like, I'm at, at this or at that or this number, and that's great, and it's entertaining, and it's not that there's no value to that, because there certainly can be some amount of value. But when you are dealing with sophisticated people problems in an organization, you need something that is much more sophisticated and nuanced and can really understand how a person's making sense of the world. And when you review someone's Birkman with them, that is really what you get to do. It's like you get to put on a pair of glasses and go, wow, this is what the world looks like to you. Like, that's fascinating, right? Because it's either like similar to how I see the world, or it is so completely different from how I see the world. And, just to give you like a few examples of, I, probably debriefed thousands and thousands of Birkmans. And we have an interest part of the Birkman, right? So the part where we talk about where your interests are and your values. And when someone has a 99 numerical interest, meaning they are more interested in numbers than 99% of the population, that even after 20 years fascinates me. Like, how can numbers be that fun to you? I don't get it. It's like the bane of my existence. It's the part of my life I try to avoid, any part that comes in. And so the fact that there's people that are like, I love a spreadsheet. I love getting into like a hard equation. And I'm like, I will never understand that.
Yeah.
I can intellectually go, that's true for you. But the experience of loving financials and Excel, it's like, I will never get that.
Isn't that wild though? The things that you like, you don't want to touch.
Yeah.
With the 10-foot pole, somebody else, that is their dream.
Yes.
Give me more.
Yes. Which, if you're a business owner, is great news, because the things that you don't want to do, there are people out there that they will love for you to pay them to do that.
Yes.
Right. And so that's one example. Or, there are people that they see the world as a very unemotional place, and they don't want emotions to be part of things. That's another thing I will never understand, right? My world is very emotional. Like, I experience things in a very emotional way. I'm emotional on the Birkman. To me, everything is emotion. And so for people to be like, I just don't want to deal with that, I'm like, I can't even imagine that, because that's pretty much where I live, is on the emotional side of life, right? Yeah. And so it continues to be, that's what makes it so fun, is that every time it's different. One of the data points I love is, as you mentioned, we've been around over 70 years, and we haven't found two identical Birkmans. So if that just underscores the point that I started with of how uniquely we are experiencing the world, we literally can't find two people that have the same Birkmans.
That's unbelievable.
It's unbelievable. Like, it seems impossible, right?
How many people have taken this assessment?
We have, millions of people on the database. And so if we, even from a Birkman standpoint, you can't find someone that's seeing the world or perceiving the world. Birkman is, we call it a personality assessment. It's more accurately an assessment of perception. So you're really saying, this is how I see the world. That's when you fill out the Birkman, that you are really saying the world is this way to me, right? And it's perception. It's how you're perceiving the world.
And that has a lot to do with our experience in the world, our perception.
It has, yes. And so the reason why I hesitated there is that we tend to think our perception is shaped by our experiences in the world. Mm-hmm. I actually think the opposite is true. Our perceptions are creating the experience. Yeah. That's a big stick. I wholeheartedly stick by that. So we make sense of it by going, that happened and that happened. And it's like, no, that's not what created the perception. The perception is creating the experience.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I'm going to need, I think that may have gone right over my head, and but I love the way that you broke that down, that there's,
well, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example. This is my favorite example. Probably like 15 years ago, I was facilitating Birkman certification. So we have people that come to our offices, and you, like you did, you go through our official Birkman certification process, and now you're a Birkman certified professional. And so I was doing a certification, and we were talking about people kind of that see the world more positively, or people that see the world more negatively. It sounds like one of those is right and wrong, but actually there's a value to both, right? People that are very optimistic, there's value to that, but they miss things. And people that are very, not pessimistic, but maybe a little more skeptical, They're not going to maybe get taken advantage of as easily, but they also may sometimes assume that people don't have their best interest when they do, right? So the thing I love about Birkman is every single score has an upside and a downside, every single score. So there's no ideal Birkman profile. There's no leadership profile. And so in this case, that's true too. There is a value to being more skeptical. It can get you into trouble, but so can being optimistic. So this guy, his scores, it kind of lead him to be more skeptical. And he raised his hand and he said, I grew up during apartheid and the things that I saw. And of course I'm going to be skeptical because if you knew what I had lived through and what I had seen as a child,
it's my experience.
Yes, you would completely understand why I have this point of view. And that's a hard thing when someone says that because I've not been through that. So I certainly don't want to take away from their experience. But I said, but here's the thing. If we take someone like Anne Frank, who we can all agree had a very negative experience of the world. And when she is on her deathbed in a concentration camp, she says, but in the end, I still believe people are good. So to her, everyone that wasn't operating from a place of goodness was an exception to the rule because her truth, her perception was people are good. And you couldn't take that out of her. No matter, literally what she saw. And she still at the end said, what I'm experiencing is the exception to the rule because my perception is people are good, right? And so what we think what happens to us is what shapes our perception. But actually our perception is what's making the rules of, that's so weird that they did that because that's not how people are. Or of course they did that because that's exactly what people will do if you give them the chance.
That's a great example. So is it fair to say that we can choose our perception?
You cannot choose your perception. So your perception is, in my opinion, like your DNA. You were born with it.
Okay.
And it's completely unique. And that's a cool thing because that is why when you get more people in a room, you're going to come out with better ideas because you're getting access to more perception, more perceptual point of views. So you cannot choose your perception. Going back to me, I am an emotional person living in an emotional world. That is my perception. I'm not going to wake up one day and go, I'm not emotional anymore. That's so interesting, right? I was emotional as a baby. I was emotional as a kid. I was an emotional teenager. I was an emotional 20, 30-year-old, and I'm an emotional 40-year-old, right? So that's not going to change. But what can change and why this is all not for nothing and why you should think about coaches is you can change how you manage the perception. So it's like, Amy, when you react that way, it's not having the intended outcome that you want. So what if we tried it instead of next time you reacting this way? What if you tried responding in this way? My perception, my emotionality didn't change, but I'm getting more adept and astute at how to manage that emotionality so that it's productive and it helps me and it's not working against me.
I love that. So there are things that happen in the world and I have a perception on it that's been baked in to my DNA. But if I can create a little bit of daylight between what's happening and how I respond, I can become a more effective leader, person, human, partner.
And that goes back to, there's a quote that we have in one of our trainings. It's Viktor Frankl, where he talks about, between stimulus and reaction, there is a space, and that space is where the choice is. And exactly what you just said, the more we become aware of that space and let that space grow, the more we have control over how we react. And we can choose more intentionally and see better outcomes. But the first step is the awareness. And so that's what Birkman does. Birkman allows you to go, this is how the world looks to you. And here's where that works. And here's where that's going to get you into trouble. And the more you really start to identify those moments where you have a reaction or you feel an internal reaction, the more you get and I love the word you used, a light on that, the more you can create space around that, the more you are able to choose a different response. And that, to me, is the essence of emotional intelligence.
How does that connect back to conflict?
It's in the reaction, right? So the people that are most at risk for conflict are people who know they know the answer and are reactive because they're so certain they know the answer, right? Because if I'm that certain and you're disagreeing with me, I'm going to react to that because you are wrong and I am right, right? So you have immediately the the breeding ground for conflict is there.
Yeah. Table has been set.
The table has been set. We are at the table ready to go. And this is why, this is what wisdom is, right? This is why, even though your perceptual DNA, in my opinion, was the same when you were 2 as it is now, and it'll be the same when you're 90 years old, it's the wisdom of how to manage that differently and to become less reactive. And the more we start to say, I don't always know, or sometimes I'm wrong, or you know what, he's been right a few times that I thought he was crazy, the larger that space gets, the less conflict you're going to have.
The more I can grow that capacity.
Yes.
I want to test something out in real time. So I think I shared with you before I got in coaching, I spent nearly 15 years working in schools. Most of that time was in student life. So if it was important to the students, it was important to me. And one of my theories from that time was, and I had a chance to co-teach on multiple occasions, and those experiences were highlights. Being in the space with another brilliant colleague that I could learn from and see how they handle things taught me so many things, including, I think, and here it is, if you had 2 teachers in every single class, you would solve 90-something% of the problems that exist in schools.
Interesting. Why?
I think it's because of what we're talking about. You're adding another human being who instantly has a different perspective on things.
That's interesting.
And so from an adult perspective, like there are 2 humans responding. You expand the surface area of what we're talking about, the ability for the adults in the room to respond effectively to what's coming in their direction. But if you put yourself in the student seat too, you've doubled the possibility of connecting differently with somebody. And I think that helps to avoid the vast majority of issues that come up because of what we're talking about. I feel like I'm right about this. Period. End of story. When I'm in a situation where the other person feels the same way, we're at an impasse. But you add more people to the equation.
And what you're saying, it kind of is the antidote to conflict is curiosity, understanding, and connection. So in your example, if a kid has an idea or they want to do something a certain way and one teacher's like, no, don't do that, right? And the other one's like, well, actually, that could be interesting. Maybe you should try. All of a sudden, I'm seen. This person understands me. I feel connected. And that's where all of a sudden, that's where we thrive as humans.
Yes.
Right? Conflict, misunderstanding closes us up, shuts us down. It makes us feel disconnected, and it turns off all our great ideas. And that's why business owners should care about this, right? I think this is always interesting of like when you talk to certain business owners, and I think this is changing slowly, but it's like the point of wanting your employees to feel connected and happy isn't just because you're a nice person and you're just trying to make them comfortable. It's because they'll have better ideas. Like they're going to be better employees who are more engaged, who have, they are going to help you be more successful. That's why you care about it. I mean, maybe you care about it just because you're a good human too, but there is a ROI to that in the same way as your example with the students.
Yes. Yeah, that was a fun experience for me because especially when faculty met to discuss how students were doing, faculty, smart people have different perceptions on how the student is doing. Maybe one teacher feels like the writing is really disorganized. Another teacher feels like the artwork is the most creative they've ever seen.
Yeah.
We're talking about the same person.
Yeah.
I had a mentor. It said we're always making first impressions. And I've tried to keep that in mind in my work. You brought in conflict at the jump. How are we doing on this topic?
I think we're doing good because my opinion is I think what we're helping people is to see where the source is and that the solution is very free and accessible. Anybody can be like, just pause and for a moment say, they're seeing something different and there could be value to that to me, right? And the more we can slow down and exercise that muscle, the better leaders we're going to be, the better companies we're going to create and build, the better cultures we're going to have. Because again, it's the point I was making of when you do these things, it accelerates connection, engagement, good ideas. It accelerates all of these positive things for the organization. And when you don't, it accelerates all the negative, right? So it's not just like, it's better if you do, but if you don't, it's okay. It's like, it's way better if you do, and it's very bad if you don't.
Yes. Can you give an example of what that might look like to be heading fast in the wrong direction?
I would say, I think this is the biggest challenge that most companies have right now. During the pandemic, when I was working with a lot of executive teams, they almost to a T, every one of them was so busy, they could barely get done what they needed to get done in a day, right? So it was very reactive. So they weren't being strategic. And if they could have slowed down to be strategic, they would have solved the problems more quickly in the future, and they would have eventually caught up. But they can't even get off the hamster wheel long enough to do that. So they're making these short-term decisions that a lot of times are recreating the work and creating more work and not actually fixing the problem. And so it's that, idea of slow down to go fast. Yeah. If they would slow down, have the conversation, like how do we strategically fix these issues, and how do we think more long term, and get the input of a lot of the people, it would help them to be strategic about how to move forward and not just be busy, which is putting out the fires today, which means 30 more fires are starting tomorrow, and I'm going to do the same thing tomorrow, right? And it was my experience, and it still has. I think companies haven't caught up still from the pandemic. Almost every company I work with, they are in firefighting mode, and they can't slow down. And what they need to do is slow down to be strategic, and they can't do it.
Because feels
the
like
world is coming at them so quickly.
Yeah.
Right. So they're like, but we have to do all these things. And it's like, well, then you're going to be busy forever, but you're not going to be productive, right? Busy is not productive.
That's a great point. The difference, the space between those two things.
Yes.
So what is something easy? Well, I say easy. What is something straightforward, simple, maybe it's hard to do, that an organization, a team, a leader can do if they feel like, if I'm listening and I'm thinking, what Amy just said sounds familiar. I feel like I'm firefighting all day long. How do you create that space?
What you manage gets measured. So if your priority is to be strategic, and that's the first, it's like, we are going to do this and make time for this, even if we have to watch certain things start to drop off. It's where you prioritize and put your energy and where your intention is. And if that is the most important thing, and you give your people permission to say, I would rather some of these things drop off because we have to do this, but there has to be a priority. And if you're not prioritizing the strategy, if you're prioritizing just getting through the day, that's going to be what you get. And that's really where it's up to the leader to take priorities off people's plates and to say, if you've got 100 things, I need to take 30 things off so that we can add this piece on, because this piece is too important not to do.
I think that's a really important point that you're making, that it can't be on the team members to take stuff off their own plates.
No, absolutely not. And usually when you look at a company or a team, the amount of priorities that they think they're going to achieve, it's like you're trying to do 100 things and you'll do none of them. If you would try to do 10, you may get 10 of them done, right? So you may come out, but to them that feels like they're slowing down. But it's like, but you're not getting anything done anyway, and you're burning your people out, right?
Yes.
You've got 100 priorities. It's impossible. And that's really the job of the leader, is to slow down and refine the strategy and to say, what are the 3 things that we have to prioritize, and everything else comes second to that. If there's time for that, great. But every day, this is the priority. Yes. This 1 or 2 or 3 things. And if it's more than that, I think you're doomed to fail.
Yes.
Or you'll burn your people out.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Fewer, better things.
Yeah. And that goes back to conflict, right? The clarity, that's clarity. And clarity is another antidote to conflict. It's like, we don't have to be conflicted or fight for resources or fight for priorities, because I'm creating the clarity that this is what matters, and that's going to reduce conflict.
Yes. In my coaching work, one of the things, and this is often the most challenging stuff that I do with my clients, we clarify values. Mm-hmm. We think about the key behaviors that are examples of those values, and then come up with a system, using questions to stay accountable to those things. Very difficult to do.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes the hardest thing is getting that list down.
Yes.
Right? We're talking
Because it
about
all feels important.
it all feels important,
Right.
getting that list down. And I think about if I'm heading out, I've got my wallet, my phone, my keys.
Yes.
Beyond that, I just will, the likelihood of me forgetting something goes up pretty quickly.
Right.
Especially when I'm trying
But if you have those three things, you're okay. Right? It's like,
I will be fine. I will be fine. Yes. Right. And so I think this is a reminder for me. And I appreciate that you're bringing this back around, that clarity is another antidote to conflict.
Yeah.
Being explicit about what matters most.
Yeah.
Because I would imagine a lot of organizations, maybe we've got values on the walls or we've talked about certain initiatives, but then if I interview people privately one-on-one and I say, tell me what is the number one priority? What's the most important thing on this team? There might be some delta between the answers.
I would almost guarantee you that. And now we have another breeding ground for conflict, because what's important to you are the things that you're responsible for. What's important to me are the things that I'm being held responsible for. So if someone's not setting that vision, creating that clarity at the top, you're going to turn your people on each other, right?
Yes.
If you set that and go, it's this, this, and this, then when we're in meetings, we can say, I know that's important to you, and I'd really, like us to get some resources for this. But at the end of the day, this, and this is what matters. And it's like, you're right. Let's focus on that, right? So again, it's a way to take you don't want your people trying to fight that out between their own initiatives and their own incentives and their own motivations. It's setting that clarity at the top and being selective. You can't do everything, and everything is not equally as important.
If somebody listening has been persuaded on the importance of or how impactful conflict can be, let's imagine they're on board with that. They're interested in the Birkman method assessment. What would you suggest in terms of next steps? How could they potentially use this tool to help them shift their team or their own leadership in a more positive direction?
Yeah, I mean, the first step, of course, is to experience the Birkman for yourself. It's interesting that it's like a very profound experience for people. They'll remember it from like 20 or 30 years ago, and they'll say, I still have my Birkman in my desk, and I pull it out, and I'm like, wow, that's 30 years ago. And usually the experience of having your own Birkman is this feeling of understanding of like, yeah, that is who I am. That is how I see the world. And because the Birkman says, here's how you see the world, and here's how that's a strength, it's a really inspiring experience, because it's like, wow, that's why you're great. That's what makes you really interesting and compelling to this world, and wholly unique. Like, you are bringing this set of strengths that nobody else has. And then once you know where you I use the word lean, like I lean this way, I lean into being creative. I lean into liking, strategy. I don't lean into numbers. Right? When we know where we lean, then we know how we need to form that team around ourselves to be successful. So I got this covered, but I need to get like a super strong numbers person on my team, because I'm avoiding them at all costs. They're still important. I just don't want to do them. So I think then it helps you strategize. How do you round out the team, the organization? Who do you need? Who is most important? A lot of times the people that you need the most next to you as a leader are the people that you're not going to like very much, because they are interested in the world, interested in different things. Yes. They see the world differently, and that might frustrate you. And so when you're interviewing, this is why you see this phenomenon where people hire in their own image, because they're like, I love this person. They're just like me. Yes. They get it.
Huge mistake.
Huge mistake. That is the last person you need at your company. You need the person that you're like, we're not going to be best friends, but she's great with the numbers.
That is such an important point. And that's so hard to do, though, because you're looking in the mirror and you're thinking, yeah. And
it's counterintuitive. And when we feel uncomfortable as humans, we think that means there's fear. There's something to be afraid of. And that's the mindset shift of, they make you uncomfortable because they're seeing things that you don't see. And as a leader, there's nothing you need more than that. And so we talk a lot about, we have a scale called the Super Q. And it's how much the person is seeing the world like you or differently from you. And the people that see the world like you are usually people that you're going to find it easier to get along with, conversation flows. I imagine you and I have a pretty high super Q. I think we probably see the world pretty similarly. The people that you have a low where you don't see the world very similarly are more challenging because they're going to arrive at different answers or they're going to see things differently from you. And that takes energy and that can feel frustrating. And yet they are the people that you need to surround yourselves with, right?
Wow.
They are the most important people. If you have an organization and you are all seeing the world the same way, I can't think of a bigger risk to you and your company.
Yeah. I love that point. I think about coaching as provoking awareness. Once we have that awareness, well, 3 parts: provoking awareness, helping my client see something differently or see something that they're not seeing. Once they have that awareness, then shifting behavior. And then doing all of that wrapped up in a co-creative way. Coaching with them. I'm not coaching at them. I think in my experience as a coach, the Birkman method assessment is one of the best ways to see, okay, what am I seeing? And then what am I not seeing? What are some opportunities for me to maybe flex in a different direction and learn from people that are, as you're describing, looking at the world in a different way?
Yeah. And I love that our value proposition is see the world differently. And to me, that's a mandate. You need to see the world differently. It's a truth. You do see the world differently. And it's an invitation to let us show you how you see the world, because then we can show you how to see the world differently until you know how you see it, right? Yes. I was thinking last night as I was thinking about our podcast today and talking about conflict. One of the best examples that had ever come out with what we're talking about, it was about 10 years ago, and this dress went viral. Do you remember this?
I don't.
Oh my gosh.
A dress?
The dress.
What's the dress?
So you'll have to Google this. So this dress goes viral. This woman is going to go to a wedding. She takes a picture. She posts it on Facebook. And there is something with this picture that for half the population, there's something in the eye that perceives the dress as white and gold.
Okay.
And the other half of the population perceives it as dark blue and black. So it's not like fuchsia and red, right?
Yeah,
it's like white and gold and navy and black.
Okay.
And so when people are responding, they're like, oh, I like the white and gold dress. Other people are going, what are you talking about? The dress is black and blue. And it sets off this firestorm of conflict. Right? Because now it's like, you're wrong. It's not that color. It's this color. And it's like Taylor Swift chimed in and she said, if the dress is not white and gold, the world is ending. That's how upsetting
and she's
it
spoken.
is.
Yeah.
That's how upsetting it is to us when our truth is challenged. And that is why it creates conflict, because it is very uncomfortable. And it was the perfect example, because we are living the dress 1,000 times every day. You're looking at something and going, it's so clearly that. And I'm thinking, you're out of your mind.
Yeah.
How can you think that? You're crazy. And you're thinking, you're crazy.
This is a great example. May I share something personal?
Yeah, please.
So I took the assessment years ago, loved it. My partner took it. And then we went out on a date night, printed out copies, sat down and started reviewing. I think people around us thought we were having a work meeting.
Yeah. They were like, oh, a working dinner.
Yeah, here for the conference. But when we were going through it, I forget which component it was. We realized we haven't talked about stress behaviors explicitly in this conversation, but that's what was present in this when we were looking at our reports. We were going over the stress behaviors, and we realized my stress behavior on a certain component was to become overly sensitive. Hers was to become overly critical. And we immediately recognized that the dress moments 1,000 times a day where this plays out. The gift of the assessment, though, was now we have a language to talk about it.
And you had numbers to quantify it. It wasn't just you get sensitive. Think about the word you use. I get sensitive and she gets critical. Those are emotionally loaded words.
For sure. If I say, hey, you're being critical, and she says, hey, you're being sensitive.
Correct. Nobody likes to be told they're sensitive or critical. I say that as a sensitive person. I'm a highly sensitive person. But when you can see the numbers of, oh, you are a 99, which means it hurts you.
Yes.
And I'm a 1. So I think I'm doing you a favor to tell you and that's where you realize the intentions are almost always good. And when you see the data validate that, it's like, oh, you really do see it that way. You're not being mean. And we've saved thousands of marriages, I'd say, for that very reason, because it's so quick, even in your marriage, to go, how dare you? You're so critical, or you're doing that to hurt my feelings, or you're being rude. And it's like their intention may be nothing of the sort.
Right. Amy, this has been a fantastic conversation on my side of things. What have we not talked about yet that you would like to spend a minute talking about?
We've covered a lot. I feel like we've done a lot around the world there. I think it's curiosity, conversation, and connection. And I think Birkman helps you accelerate those things, but it is absolutely possible to do on your own. You don't need an assessment. You don't need Birkman to do it. It's slowing down, getting curious, having conversation, and that conversation, whether you agree or not, creates connection. And if we could all just do a little bit more of that, I think the world would be a exponentially better place.
Amazing. I like to end with takeaways. So I want to share a takeaway for me that came up over the course of the conversation. I'll kick it to you. I have the fortune of having Marshall Goldsmith, one of the world's premier executive coaches, as a mentor. And he has taught me the magic of the practice of daily questions. You get to the end of a day and you ask yourself a set of questions. Pretty simple and straightforward, but again, like the stuff that we're talking about, exquisitely difficult to do consistently over time. I'm thinking about adding a new daily question. Did I do my best to be curious today?
I love that.
Because you've persuaded me over the course of this conversation that it's not, we can focus on conflict, but we can also make significant ground by focusing on curiosity. Did I do my best to show up in a curious way over the course of the day? I bet if I ask that question of myself more often, I'm a happier person. The people around me are probably having a better experience. So that's my takeaway. Did I do my best to be curious today?
I like that because that's a tool available to anybody.
Yeah, and it's free.
Anybody can just be like, I want to slow down for a moment. And instead of just getting to a quick reaction or decisive thought, you're wrong. That's a good point. That's not a good point. That's not a good way. That those immediate reactions that we have, just slowing that down and going, can I just be curious for a moment? And my takeaway was, I loved when you said to shine a light on that moment, because I think that is what it's about, right? Awareness is a light. That's what you really mean. You're like focusing on something, you're giving it your energy, you're shining a light on it. And it's the only way you are going to change how you're doing things, right? And the goal is to know your strengths and double down on those, and also help yourself minimize the things that get you into trouble. And that's wisdom. And I think something like Birkman, it helps you fast track that journey.
Fantastic. How can folks follow your work or link up if they're interested in what you're building? Yeah,
definitely follow Birkman on LinkedIn. We're on Instagram. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. If it's something you are interested in exploring or learning more about, and you would like someone from Birkman to contact you, you can send me a DM on LinkedIn and I will have someone follow up with you. But for us, we are the people fixer tool, and I haven't met a person yet that doesn't have a people issue.
Yes. I think that's...
Or reach out to you and find out about your services.
Sure. Yeah. The people stuff.
Yeah.
The people stuff. Amy Shepley, what a joy. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing your wisdom. And folks listening, thank you for listening.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning into the Delta Podcast. If you're ready to lead through change, stay with us. Until next time, remember, it's always a great day to be coachable.